SVP from Sweden.
Fellow European comrades, I would like to start with expressing my appreciation to the organizers of this meeting. It is a great honor to be here and to have the possibility to talk about the situation in Sweden and the development of our party, Svenskarnas parti. My name is Stefan Jacobsson and I'm the chairman of Svenskarnas parti, or Party of the Swedes, that is the English translation. I will talk some more about our party in a little bit, but first, to understand why we have founded our party, you must understand the situation in Sweden. When people think of Sweden, they think of Vikings. They think of companies like IKEA, Volvo and Ericsson. They think of inventors like Alfred Nobel, or they think of perhaps our beautiful women. But what they don't think of is that Sweden has one of the most extreme immigration policies in Europe, and that our level of political correctness cannot be compared to any other nation in the world. I will attempt to make a brief presentation about the situation in Sweden, and I can guarantee you that many of you will not believe your ears. The Swedes are, as a principle, a very peaceful people. We have not been in war for over 200 years. So when the Second World War ended in 1945 and Europe was shattered in ruins, we were still a very strong and healthy nation. During the 1900s, we were building up a modern welfare state with a very high standard of living for the people. We were building what you in Sweden was calling the svenska folkhemmet. The English translation is the Swedish people's home, or folk home. But the translation doesn't make the concept justice. For many years, our society was improving. The people got a higher standard of living. The grades of our boys and girls were among the highest in the schools. New companies were created by innovators. We had functional hospitals. We took good care of our senior citizens. The people who were building this was actually the Social Democrats in Sweden. But when you look at their party today, you cannot believe it. Today they don't care anymore about the Swedish people. It was a very long time ago when their leaders expressed, the Swedes are fortunate to be living in an ethnic homogeneous society, as a comment of the race riots that was going on at the time in the US. But this is all history, because the Social Democrats have left the politics of building the svenska folkhemmet. Today they want to build a home for the entire world in Sweden. Today they follow the path of the multiculturalism, of the globalists and the banksters. Actually, in less than 2 weeks from now, one of the world's most powerful meetings will be held in London, and the Social Democratic leader, Stefan Löfven, he will be participating. And I am, of course, talking about the powerful Bilderberg meeting that they will arrange in London. But we will go back to the past again. For a very long time, since I told you, the society was improving. In Sweden, we didn't have a very little criminality. The Swedish society was actually a really good place to live in. I can still remember in the 1890s when I was growing up that people on the countryside, they didn't even lock their doors at night. But something happened. During the 60s and 70s, the immigration debate started in the mass media. And this was especially initiated by a small ethnic foreign group living in Sweden, which had a very strong impact on the Swedish society. And it led to a decision by the Swedish government in 1975 that Sweden should be a multicultural society. And I have to emphasize that this decision was not made by accident, but rather it was a result from a handful of activists struggling to remodel our country. And what is remarkable is that almost no one reacted to this madness. But on the other hand, why should people react? Since for a very, very long time in Sweden, we have trusted our leaders. Because we had almost no corruption in our society. The people were honest, loyal and hardworking, which also led to that the people let their guards down. They didn't see what was coming. About 100 years ago, the proportion of foreign-born were 0.7%. In the year of 2000, the proportion was 10.9%. And then that doesn't include people whose parents are foreigners. In the year of 2020, the official statistics estimate that 21% of Sweden's inhabitants will be foreigners. And this doesn't still include people with one parent born abroad or children born in Sweden by people with foreign background. And this is how rapid the demographic change in Sweden is. Even though we are a very small country with only 9 million inhabitants, we give permanent residence to more than 100,000 people each year. And it gives them the full right to our welfare system. And did you know that during the last Iraq war, the Swedish city of Södertälje received more refugees from that area than the entire United States? And this is how extreme our immigration policy is. And the immigrants doesn't just get the same rights as us ethnic Swedes. They get even more added benefits. And I will give you some startling examples. When you arrive in Sweden, you can get what they call an introduction benefit. But that's not enough. You can also get a supplementary introduction benefit. And if this does not enough, you can also get a supplementary introduction benefit for housing. And all of this you can get for several years without doing anything. Also in Sweden, all parents, they are giving birth to a child. They are allowed to stay home for 460 days, with the state paying approximately 80% of their salary. This of course includes Swedes as well, but now they have done that immigrants, they can get this retroactive from the time they weren't even living in Sweden. So when the African people come with 7-8 children, boom, jackpot, they won the lottery. But even if Sweden has one of the most generous immigration policies in the world, it's not enough for our politicians. Because the people living in Sweden illegally, that has been denied asylum for one reason or another, or have never sought it, they still have the same rights as Swedes to free medical care, to free dentists, and also have the right to go to school. And if they go to school, listen to this. The school has no obligations towards the police to inform them that there are people living here illegally and help them to deport them. It's rather the opposite. The school shall not contact the police if such things happen. And this is what Sweden has become. A free zone for people from all over the world using our welfare system and drowning our economy. And at the same time spreading violence and crime in our society. This week we have seen riots for 6 days in a row, started in Stockholm last Sunday. Today it has spread and it's burning cars and houses for more than 18 different cities in Sweden. But we will also look at Sweden from another perspective. How has the last decade's politics affected our economy then? If we go back 40 years from now, we had a national debt of 42.9 billion Swedish kroners. Today, we have a national debt of more than 1,200 billion Swedish kroners. It is an increase of more than 2,600% in 40 years. And still they try to fool people that we have a welfare, that our society is rich. But how can a country with 1,200 billion kroners in debt be rich? Almost 16,000 euros per person. It is impossible for me. And this leads us to our next question. We have tried to get a straight answer from our central bank. Who are we in debt to? Who have borrowed us all this money? When every nation in Europe are more or less in the same situation as Sweden, with big debts, who have the possibility to access so large numbers? And that is a key question. And the answer is frightening. It is probably the largest fraud the world have ever seen, where the banksters and the global corporations are the winner. And you can see it in several parts in Europe right now, when they're taking possessions of people's joint assets, and more or less now controlling entire countries. Not only the economy, also the politics. The only ones getting rich in all of this is the banksters. In the year of 2011, Sweden's 4 major banks made a profit of 9 billion euros. This is twice as much than what our legal system costs in a year. But let's move back a little again. After the devastating political decision to make Sweden into a multicultural society in 1975, the years went by. Still no one reacted to this madness, at least not very many. Because you see, the way our society had worked for such a long time, there had not been need for a perceived nationalistic movement in that sense before. The nationalistic roots had always been a part of our collective subconsciousness. But somewhere along the way, due to the great impact from the mass media and the pressure from the political establishment, we forgot our roots, our obligations to our forefathers and our children. And as I was saying, we don't have a long living tradition to work nationalistic in Sweden. The thoughts, the ideas, they have been there, but only in our consciousness, not as a movement. Of course, there were some attempts in the 1920s and 1930s, but when the war ended in 1945, most of them were weakened and disappeared. And this is actually a huge difference between Sweden and a lot of other European countries, where you have a living tradition of working in a nationalistic way, so that today many of you are well established. You have a good foundation to build from. You have lawyers, you have authors, you have thinkers, you have financiers, etc., etc. In Sweden, it was the young people in the 1990s and in 2000 that started to working nationalistic from more or less scratch. We had rarely people older than 30. We had no elderly giving us advice on how we should work, what lessons to be learned, or how to finance our movement. We had to learn from ourselves, from making the mistakes. The movement went through several phases, trying to learn how to best achieve our goals. And we have now reached present days. The situation in Sweden that I presented earlier is catastrophic. Not only because of the immigration with all of its problems, not only because we are in the hands of the international economic system with huge debts, but that the establishment, the politicians and the government seems to more or less hate and detest their own people. Our Prime Minister, Fredrik Reinfeldt, once said, and now I quote, "Only the pure barbarism is Swedish. Everything else comes from outside." End of quote. The Social Democrats' previous leader, Mona Sahlin, once said, and now I quote again, I believe that is what makes Swedes so jealous of immigrants. You have a culture, an identity, a history, something that binds you all together. And what do we have? We have midsummer and such ridiculous things. End of quote. And this is just two of many examples from politicians that are polluting the minds of the Swedes. They have actually gone so extreme now that they are claiming that there is no Swedish people. There have never been a Swedish people, because we have all immigrated to Sweden at some point. And this, my fellow Europeans, this is what kind of mindset we are dealing with in Sweden. And this leads us to the founding of our party, Svenskarnas parti. It was a Saturday in a beautiful autumn day at 2008. The party was announced. It was founded by the very same people who had been active in the nationalistic movement in Sweden since they were young. But now they have grown up. Mistakes have been made in the past, but also learned from. A new platform and strategy had been adapted, and we are now ready to face the responsibility to bring Sweden off its knees and back on its legs again, to secure the future existence of our people. After only a little more than a year after the party was founded, we ran in the elections in several municipalities, and that led us to our first local seat in a Swedish town. This started a great panic in the mass media and amongst the politicians. So they went to such length that they forced the tax authorities to register our candidate in another town, so that he wouldn't be able to keep his seat in the city's council. And this is how the establishment works to encounter us. But since then, there have been several politicians that have seats in city's council who have joined our party and are representing us there. Last year, we had a member increase of over 100%. We are becoming the unifying party for all Swedish nationalists, so that we can work more and more together. And I think the key for our quick expansion is that the entire organization is working with huge passion. We have an ambition to succeed, and we have a positive attitude towards the future. But also that our leadership and representatives has been through the hard trials, earning their respect and confidence among nationalists in Sweden. But you should not consider Svenskarnas parti as only a political party that competes in the elections, but as a political force that is working in multiple various areas. We have our own publishing house where we publish books that can educate and inspire our people, that can evoke debate. We organize study circles and lecture in politics, society, history, culture, and so on. Every year we organize a big family camp that stretches for over 4 days with activities for both youngsters and elderly. We also organize celebrations around Christmas and in the summer on our National Day. We arrange memorials for those who have sacrificed themselves for Sweden and those victims who have been sacrificed in the name of the multiculturalism. We organize an international conference each year called Vision Europe to strengthen the ties between nationalist groups around Europe. This year we had representatives from 7 countries, including Forza Nova from Italy and NPD from Germany. In the audience there were only over 250 attendees and activists, and that makes it the largest nationalistic international conference in Sweden since the 1950s. We're working to establish our own alternative media. We have a online radio broadcast that transmits twice a week. We have a monthly high-quality magazine. We have a registered online newspaper with about 200,000 unique readers every month. We organize demonstrations, meetings. Our activist conducts more than 200 activities each month. We are, without hesitating, one of the fastest growing political forces in Sweden today. Another thing worth mentioning is the service to the communities that are performed by our members, during which we don't talk about what kind of society we want to create, but also live and inspire it. For example, we have renovated schoolyards that the municipality has ignored. We have cleaned forest areas and playgrounds. We have conducted blood donor drives and much more. And this is where we are today. Next year there will be the general elections, and we don't believe in any miracles. But we have a set goal to gain 10 seats in the local municipal or city councils and gain 10,000 votes in the parliamentary elections. And this will grant us a platform that we can grow from, and also convince a lot of those who believe today that you can't achieve success with open nationalistic politics. Our common European struggle is without a long one. We have to take it step by step. But as we have seen in countries like Hungary or Greece, the nationalistic movement can also go very fast. And my wish to you, representatives from nationalistic groups around Europe, is that you do your part, that you work your hardest, and that you are not afraid to deal with the necessary questions, the important questions. We must put a stop to the influence of our economy from the banksters. Only the states should be given the right to issue the money. We must fight to resist the European Union. It is a devastating what is happening now when our nations are becoming slaves to the bureaucrats. We must criticize the roots of our problems of our nations. And this is very important if we want to recreate a Europe, a free nation, a flourishing Europe in peace and prosperity. This must be done. I believe we are now living in historical times. We have no other choice but to prevail. We must prevail for the sake of our people's future. Our whole existence depends on it. Thank you very much for listening.